Phone Story: The Journey from This to That. A mobile game developed by Mole Industria. It provides the user with 4 short minigames chronicling the life cycle of the very smartphone they're using to play the game. The first stage of the game showcases the birth of a smartphone through the mining of raw materials by child laborers held at gunpoint. Stage 2 displays the horrific scene of factory workers attempting to commit suicide due to unhappiness in working conditions. This is stopped only by suicide prevention nets. Stage 3 exhibits the smartphone as we know it, presented as the newest Apple product the masses flock to pick up. In this instance, consumers are exaggerated to be mindless, violent, zombie-like creatures, hell-bent on getting what they came for, at whatever cost. The final segment of the game sees the smartphone in its final form. Scrap metal remains cut apart and dismantled as a once treasured item becomes nothing more than garbage. The game is set up in a linear fashion, as the user must pass each minigame with a certain amount of points before moving on to the next segment. There is no way to access the game out of order, though the game can instantly be replayed, further illustrating the point of the repetitive cycle of our favorite smartphone. The game has a very familiar design, similar to many retro video games of the past or nostalgic titles of today. The bit-style gimmick counters the modern subject matter, though it does trivialize the subject enough to illustrate the point that the user would be more likely to mindlessly play this game rather than actually acknowledge the deeper message here. As far as new media elements are concerned, Phone Story includes everything inherent in a video game. This includes video, sound, story, and gameplay. Think of this as any other app game you might find on your phone, like Candy Crush or Clash of Clans, except it's about why playing those games is bad. Phone Story is not a fun experience. Upon opening up the app, I was overjoyed to find something simplistic and fun-looking. I was quickly proved wrong by the first segment of the game, as I took control of armed soldiers demanding overworked children to get back to work. My mood did not improve as I took control of factory workers, catching potential suicide victims on trampolines, or when I controlled an uncaring Apple employee, checking smartphones at zombie shoppers, or when I ripped apart the same phones I handed out before, just to drive home how useless the whole process is. By the end of the game, I felt distinctly less happy than I was before I opened the app. Suffice to say, I did not use my phone much that day. As mentioned before, the game moves in a linear fashion. The player moves from the first segment to the second, to the third, and to the final level, each time they choose to play. However, there are 2 different game modes. Story mode features narration by your phone, who explains to you the real-life history behind the minigames you're playing. And if for some reason you are unable to beat the level, it'll chide you by saying don't act like you're not complicit. Suggesting that the user has no free will is frightening, but what's truly spine-chilling is the desolescence mode. This is the same as the story mode, but minus narration. Here you're just trying to get the highest score. In a game about playing games on this device, and how dehumanizing it is, it just enforces the creator's point, and that's freaky. On a lighter note, Phone Story meets all of Lev Manovich's principles of new media. Numerical representation, as all elements within the game can be altered and can be represented as code. Modularity, as each aspect of the game can be changed individually from each other and can be utilized in other media. Automation, the computer moderates the actions of each level in the game. The user must interact with automatically programmed and generated difficulty to proceed. Variability, each attempt at the game is different, as tasks are produced at random, and the user's interaction with the game varies each time. And finally, transcoding. This is probably the most relevant principle to the game, as the world of the game comments on our own world. The game made by humans exists in the computer world. However, the subject matter and the interactivity of the game displayed directly affects those who interact with it, think about it, read about it, or even know it exists. Similarly, the work of Ian Bogost is incredibly relevant to Phone Story. Bogost, in contrast to Marshall McLuhan, suggests that not only is the medium the message is the message too. He suggests that the content within a piece is equally as important as the platform it exists on. Thus, following Bogost's philosophy, we can read into what's going on in Phone Story. We find a satirical piece about the hidden darker side of everyone's favorite smartphone. What does this mean to us? First and foremost, we perceive that the game is commenting on the consumer's ignorance of the origins of the device they hold in their hand. The game goes further, as it suggests that not only are we ignorant, once we learn, we'll be complicit. We'll ignore the truth because it doesn't directly affect us. In fact, we may not even care to understand what's going on in Phone Story. We may instead just comment on how stupid, repetitive, and short the game is, delete it from our phone, and move on to some other mindless game. So that's Phone Story. Do with that information what you will. Don't worry, you can look down at your phone now.